And welcome to this meeting of the London Borough of Newham's Crime and Antisocial Behaviour Scrutiny Commission. Can everybody present hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Fantastic. This evening's meeting will be held at Newham Town Hall. Members unable to join us physically at this location are able to join remotely. However, they will not be able to vote and their attendance won't be officially recorded, although their virtual attendance will be noted in the minutes. I would like to welcome the members of the public and press who are physically attending or watching on YouTube. With regard to the meeting etiquette, members of the council, please can I ask that you indicate that you wish to speak by raising your physical hand or by using the hand up symbol on the Zoom dashboard. Please can everyone be mindful of each other and please observe sensible etiquette to help reduce the spread of COVID. Please can everyone be mindful that for this meeting we will be aided by Roger Raymond and also Richard Plummer, who will assist councillors and officers with technology. This meeting of the London Borough of Newham's Crime and Antisocial Behaviour Scrutiny Commission is now called to order. Agenda item number 1, introductions and welcomes. I would like to welcome everybody to this meeting. Agenda item number 2, apologies for absence. Roger, do we have any apologies?
Councillor Muggle and Tim Aldridge.
Councillor Muggle. Okay. And Tim Aldridge. Does anybody else have any apologies?
Councillor Bailey.
Councillor Bailey. Okay.
Jennifer?
Yeah, Councillor Bailey.
Yeah, Bailey, yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much. Moving on to agenda item number 3, declarations of interest. Are there any members wishing to make any declarations of interest at this time? No? Okay, that will be noted for the minutes. Agenda item number 4, the minutes of the previous meeting. Our last meeting was held on the 27th of January 2022, and the minutes of the previous meeting will be agreed at the next meeting due to the short turnaround time from our last meeting. Thank you. Moving on to our substantive item, agenda item number 5. This item is for the Commission to consider the work of the youth offending team and review the action plan that was implemented after the youth offending team's inspection. I'm delighted to welcome to this meeting Councillor Sarah Ruiz, Member for Children's Social Care and Education, Councillor James Beckles, Cabinet Member for Crime and Community Safety, Emma Cockrell, Director of Operations and Safeguarding Children and Young People Directorate, Michelle Edwards, Head of the Youth Offending Operations and Safeguarding, got Councillor James Beckles again, Gary Connors, Assistant Director of Community Safety, and Geetha Subramaniam Mooney. I haven't got your official title, but I do know you are our Commissioner for Young People. Is that correct? Yeah, okay, close enough. We are also meant to have some police in attendance. I don't believe they're here yet. Without further ado, can I pass over to Emma so that you can make some opening remarks?
Thank you, Chair. So we are attending this evening to provide an update and answer any questions in relation to the Youth Justice Service Improvement Plan. And we've provided some various papers and updates to help guide that conversation. And Head of Service for the Youth Justice Service, Michelle Edwards, is going to present in respect of the update.
Thank you very much, Emma. Passing over to Michelle.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Emma. Good evening, everybody. So this is an update on the Youth Justice Service Improvement Plan following the last inspection by Her Majesty's Inspectorate in June 2019. In June 2019, we had a visit by Her Majesty's Inspectorate to undertake a single assessment of the youth justice services. The outcome of that assessment was published in September 2019, and there were 5 key recommendations that were made. So I will go through the progress against each of those 5 recommendations. The first recommendation was to ensure that staffing levels were sufficient and practitioners were able to deliver a high quality service to children, young people, and appoint a specialist victim worker. So I'm pleased to say that we have a restorative approaches practitioner within the service. That practitioner is fully embedded within the structure and across the partnership. Having that post and position has provided us with the opportunity to liaise directly with those who have been harmed in the community and those who have been indirectly harmed. In addition, that practitioner has been able to engage with our wider partners, so children's social care and more specifically care homes, to undertake training and support to care home staff and to prevent placements. We have direct examples of placements not breaking down due to difficulties within those children's living environments. The Youth Justice Service workforce have undergone learning and development, so training on restorative approaches, and that has also extended to our wider partnership and stakeholders. We have ongoing activities and interventions in terms of a restorative approach in the form of intervention, so that's one-to-one and group work interventions. More recently, we have reviewed our physical space, so to ensure that the Youth Justice Service location delivers and provides a visible restorative approach. The second recommendation from the inspection is for operational managers, so that's team managers, to demonstrate that there is an agreed management oversight with the YOS practitioners. So in order for us to strengthen that, we have done a lot of work to improve our quality assurance systems and processes. We're working quite closely with our data analysis team and colleagues, and our practice learning and development team and colleagues across the partnership to ensure that there are robust and clear systems in place for operational managers to review practice and performance, and also to provide protected time for themselves, but also for the practitioners in terms of their work being undertaken. We've seen clear evidence in terms of improvement of management oversight, and the evidence and reason for this is additional capacity, so more capacity across the management group of staff. We've been able to identify as an operational management group some of the blockages to practice. So each staff member has a bespoke work plan that's been undertaken through our appraisal system. We have a clear appraisal system within the service that operates through a golden thread system, where we're able to set clear targets, goals, and aspirations for staff in terms of their own career development, but also in terms of ensuring that recording and actions are followed through. The third action is around timeliness of assessments, and this is ongoing, so it's dynamic, and whilst we continue to see positive improvement, it's a focus of the recommendation that continues to be an ongoing focus. So I think it's fair to say that whilst timeliness of assessment has improved, and we see that it has significantly improved, we're able to understand what are the specific blockages as to why we would struggle to be at 100% in terms of assessments being completed within the desired time frame. So, like most services, we operate within a national standard system, and assessments are required to be completed within a specific time frame. I'm assured and confident that all of the children that we are supporting have contact, face-to-face and virtual contact. I'm assured that all of the children have a relevant and current assessment. The work and the focus around management oversight contributes to the delay in the timeliness of assessments. So ensuring that the quality of those assessments are clear, we're often engaging in a process whereby the quality assurance, we're going backward and forward in terms of assessments being countersigned when team managers are fully confident that it meets the standards as required. I'm of the view that we are in a defensible position in terms of the quality and timeliness of our assessments. The next action is recording processes. to ensure that all of the work with children and young people is properly recorded on our database. So we have reviewed staff capacity, we have reviewed staff caseload, and the staff members on average are holding 9 cases. The recommended benchmark by HMIP is 10, and we haven't gone over 10 cases since we've been inspected. So we've been able to meet the recommendation, but we're off the view that there is some flexibility is required, just given the demands and the complexities of the children and families that we are supporting. We have provided protected time for practitioners in their working week, and that time is specifically protected to focus on recording contacts with children. We've streamlined our processes, so we've introduced and refreshed templates for practitioners to review and to follow, and we've delivered specific learning and development to provide confidence and reassurance to staff members that they're not required to record chapter and verse. I think if they are recording purposefully and meaningfully, following the additional learning and development training and workshops that's been delivered, then that will definitely see some improvement in the timeliness of our recording. And then the final action was around capacity to deliver out of court disposals. So that's our disposals where children are at risk of offending behaviour, they haven't been convicted, and the specific staff members who are responsible for implementing out of court disposals interventions are also those staff members who are working with children on a voluntary basis. So we've been able to streamline that particular offer, working in partnership with our wider partners, so across early help and children's social care and our youth empowerment service, and ensure that when we are working with children, that their exit plan is clear and includes those partner agencies and those voluntary community sector organisations who are based in the community. So I'm pleased and confident at the progress of the recommendation against the action plan. The specific focus for us that is ongoing is timeliness of assessments. That's our specific focus that is ongoing and that we are continuing to ensure is a priority. In terms of the Youth Justice Partnership Board, so we recently had a review of that board. And that was to ensure that all members were fully informed of the key priorities, strengths and pressures and challenges of the Youth Offending Service. We have a timetable of activities and interventions that board members can partake and get involved in, and that includes visiting the Youth Offending Service to observe and get involved in interventions and activities, contributing to task and finish groups and multi-agency meetings and panels, providing buddying and coaching support to children, particularly our young black males who are overrepresented across the system. So going forward, in terms of our performance and benchmarking where we are across our partners, we have 3 national indicators that we report on a quarterly basis to the Youth Justice Board that we are measured against, and they are reducing the risk of reoffending, reducing the volume of children entering the youth justice system for the first time, and reducing our use of custody. And out of those 3 national indicators, we are focusing on reducing reoffending as one of our key priorities, recognising that there is further work to do to strengthen our approach and to ensure that approach is more collaborative and includes partners and our voluntary community organisations across the system. We recognise that we are working with a small group of children in comparison to the wider children and young people population. So we're working with 30 children at the moment who are at risk of reoffending for a variety of reasons. So there are a number of contributory factors to that. That includes their use and their engagement in substance misuse, but also those children who are not engaged in employment and education, employment and training due to being at risk of being groomed and exploited by older and organised criminal networks. So to conclude, our improvement journey and plan is continuing. It's COVID has definitely been significant in perhaps halting the progress of the plan. Whilst most services were subject to lockdown, as a frontline service, we remained open and offered face-to-face support and guidance to children at the start of the pandemic. That has now increased, so that face-to-face and virtual contact continues, and we're offering a service between 9 and 7 p.m. Monday to Friday, so throughout the week. So supporting those children, particularly those who are in education, training, employment, and ensuring that they've got that adequate support between the 5 and 7 p.m. And that includes a partnership response, primarily with Newham Work and some voluntary sector partners. And then just to conclude, we're always keen to get feedback from our children, our parents and carers, from the community, residents, and also from our partners and stakeholders. So we do a lot to engage and record and evidence what we are doing as a means of testing if it's meaningful and if it's making any difference. So you'll see in the pack that's been sent out in advance that there are feedback from a child, a family member, in terms of their experience at the youth offending service, but I think more importantly their experience as to why the programs that were delivered were effective, and as a consequence of the example within your pack, we were able to return a child to court for an order to be revoked early based on their progress, but based on the outcomes that were achieved across the partnership. So I'll conclude there and happy to take any questions or if anything needs clarifying, Chair.
Thank you very much, Michelle. Thank you. Very comprehensive as always. Thank you very much. Greatly appreciated. I just want to give Councillor Ruiz the opportunity to say a few words if she'd like to.
I would indeed, Chair. I think that Scrutiny, the Commission might wish to have the assurance that actually all three, Councillor Carleen Lee Parkway, Councillor James Beckles and I all sit on the Youth Justice Board. I have to say, I think in the last 18 months to 2 years, that board has become far more dynamic. And I think that we certainly have every opportunity to participate and to learn from the staff and Michelle. I would say, and this is a little plug really, what we really need is for that service to move into a much nicer and better building. I don't think personally the building is fit for purpose, although having said that, I think that Michelle and her team do an amazing job in making it what it is. But the progress that we have seen over the last 18 months, 2 years to 18 months, has been really steady. And we have had real assurances that differences have been made. And it was only this week we were privileged to see a video that had been recorded by some of the young people. And although it was a bit jumpy, we did get really good feedback. And what I thought was very interesting was that all of the young people, when asked what could be improved, they were all very happy with the service they were getting. And I think that we have provided a real safe haven for some of our most vulnerable children and young people. So that's all I have to say, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Ruiz. And I want to associate myself with your comments as well about the building. On many visits, I've seen the work that Michelle and her team have done to make it as nice as possible. And even that room that you've created to the left as you go in up the stairs, I think it's like a little games room. But you can just see the imagination of you and your team just trying to make the best of what you've got. But I do definitely echo what Councillor Ruiz said. A new purpose-built building would be brilliant. So we'll push for that. Geetha, have you got any remarks that you would like to make? And I bring you in especially because you mentioned the fact that you were on the Newham Youth Justice Partnership Board. So maybe you might just want to give the committee just a few minutes on that, just so that we get a better understanding.
Sure. Thank you very much, Chair. So, yes, I'm the chair of the Newham Youth Justice Partnership Board. And just to kind of give some context, it's a requirement of every local authority partnership area to have one of these boards that brings together the partners to pay attention to youth justice, not just what the Youth Justice Service is doing, but what the whole partnership is doing and contributing to the agenda. And I think, you know, as you will note from the 2019 inspection, the leadership was flagged as an area of good practice, but it's always important that as things keep shifting and changing, and has been doing in the youth justice landscape, that we as a local partnership have a grip of all the moving parts. So as Councillor Ruiz has just said, I think it's been really insightful since we had a kind of review of the partnership, the membership, and also the importance of the role each partner plays in that partnership board, that we've now been able to really demonstrate, I think, how, for example, what is the role of you all as the partners to try and prevent children coming into the youth justice system? Because once they're in the system, Michelle is obviously recorded and having a performance indicator around it, but it's about what we all do collectively to try and make sure children don't get harmed and don't come into the system in the first place. And I think that way in which you know, the data is now being demonstrated and produced for the board members is making it easier so that everyone is able to engage with it, ask the questions that perhaps they didn't really know the answers to. And also, therefore, it leads us to say, and so what are we going to do to reduce first-time entrants, or what are we going to do together to stop young people reoffending? So as the chair, I think, you know, I hopefully am able to kind of cajole the partnership, but really I think we can see genuine demonstration of resource commitment from health, from probation, and obviously from our local authority and our police colleagues. And we can also see, I think, a genuine commitment to really tackling those three key performance indicators. And what I think has also been really, really great to see is the connection between strategic partners and the service, because I think there's always this this kind of maybe a myth about what does the youth justice service do, and you hear about it theoretically, but that connection now, the things that Michelle talked about that are happening, the board members can actually, I think, you know, tangibly see the work that happens. So when you talk about restorative practice, it's a word, and it's a, you know, it's quite an important theoretical practice. When you see it in practice with the caseworkers and the young people in the group work or the one-to-one, it really does show you that that is the model that's making the difference. And I genuinely think that we have come a long way. There's a lot more to do, and there are always challenges in terms of youth justice provision. But I think that as the chair of the partnership board, I'm reassured by all the things that we are being shown and that we are seeing as a group, and that there is genuinely a grip across the partnership in making sure this service continues to improve with the rest of the partners. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you very much, Keith. Councillor Betts, I know it's not your area, but if you do have anything you want to add, I just want to give you the opportunity. I don't want to leave you out. So if you do have anything to add to this.
No, it was only to echo what Councillor Ruiz had mentioned about the partnership board and how effective that is. It's not just a talking shop, but I think from Councillor Ruiz and Councillor Lee Parkway's positions as well, it's about challenging, you know, what we're told, about assessing those areas, and also the improvement journey. Michelle has helpfully set out, you know, what they've done in terms of the recommendations, but it's quite clear, especially from a community safety perspective, about safeguarding and ensuring that those young people aren't going to be a danger to themselves or future down the line to anyone else. So it's about understanding reoffending rates, but also what interventions can be put in place to keep young people safe, but also keep our borough safe.
Brilliant. Thank you. Thank you very much. Does any member have any questions this time? Okay. I'll take them in the order that I saw them. So it's literally like that way. So Councillor Gray.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you for the report and the presentation. At the risk of sounding like Councillor Terence Paul, and the older I get, the more like Councillor Paul I get. I mean, there's lots of really good, interesting data, lots of sort of like secondary evidence and subjective evidence about successes and way forward. But when you've got sort of you don't use the word targets, but you've got targets such as the reducing reoffending, reducing custody. And I appreciate, again, it's a relatively small number of young people at any one time. But imagine if it's an average of 30 over a year, there must be quite significant numbers of children. But I mean, can you have targets about, last 5 years there's been an average of 25 kids or young people in custody at any one time. But over the next 3 years, we want to bring that down to an average of 20. So, I mean, am I misreading this? Are there any sort of hard targets rather than soft targets? And I appreciate soft targets are important, but, it'd be, if possible, hard targets that all the stakeholders involved will be held accountable for. That includes, obviously, the local authority.
Okay, thank you. Michelle?
Yeah, thank you. So the targets are set on a annual basis, and we do a comparison on a year-by-year basis, and that does look at the last 3 years in terms of that trajectory. I think, as we've seen with COVID, things are seasonal. And we know with children being at risk of harm and offending behaviour, that it changes throughout the year. So it's different from in the summer. There's an impact in terms of because that we've got brighter weather, for example, and then towards the end of the year, we sometimes see an impact in terms of those children who are transitioning. I think the question is around setting targets for a year, hard targets, and I think that would face us with some challenges. And I think that the current targets around on a quarterly basis, I think are more realistic benchmarks.
Okay. Can I just come in on the supplementary, Councillor Ray? I mean, I understand what you're saying about different, demand times and peaks and troughs in offending and all the rest of it. But I think essentially what Councillor Gray was saying, from what I understood, let's say, for example, you have 30 children that you're working with this year. Your target potentially could be that next year you're only going to have a maximum of 20. So I think the point is what he's saying is where are the hard targets? Because essentially, as I've said many times from this chair's position, in many different areas, by the way, not just in your area, but if we don't have something to aim for, then how do we know what success looks like? And I think essentially that's what Councillor Gray is saying, is that in this, there's almost aspirations that you want to decrease things, but there is no real firm target. And it's generally the case, not saying it is the case with your service, but it's generally the case that if organisations don't have a target to aim for, they often drift around, and they may, things may get lower, but they don't necessarily get drastically lower. So, I mean, you may not have the figure now, but you did talk about quarterly targets. If that could be sent to the committee, we would really appreciate that. Is that okay?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Okay, fantastic. Councillor Patel. Go on. You were writing, so do you want to go first? You ready?
Oh, I'd love to go first.
Yeah, okay, Councillor.
I think for me, the $1 million question is the one at point 1 here. And you haven't directly answered it. And that is whether you've got the staffing levels you need to ensure there are sufficient practitioners to deliver a high quality service. I mean, we've heard about fantastic things going on, but have you got the capacity? And is there the capacity within your stakeholders to support you to deliver?
Yeah, sure. Sure. So I can reiterate, it's covered in the briefing, but in terms of our staffing levels, yes. So we are fully staffed. It's a permanent, stable staff team in response to the inspection. One of the recommendations was to appoint a specialist victim worker. So that has happened, and yes, we are fully staffed as a staff team. In terms of resources across the partnership, so the Youth Justice Service is built on a multi-agency framework. So we work extensively with a number of stakeholders, both statutory and from the voluntary community organisations within ours on a weekly basis. So yes, we are fully staffed.
And do they have capacity though? Because I know you sort of mentioned CAMS, and we know all the demands upon CAMS. Do they have the capacity to give you the support you need to deliver?
Yeah, so we have two full-time CAMS practitioners based within the Youth Justice Service, and then we work with some other partners who are also trained and specialist in providing support around trauma-informed and emotional well-being. So there are sufficient services that we are engaging with. We work with Mind, Street Doctors, for example, and they also support in providing support to children around emotional well-being.
Thank you.
And can I quickly ask one more question, which is a supplementary? You mentioned working with the voluntary sector. One area where I couldn't see voluntary sector presence, but I think that there might be a benefit. When you were talking about the Newham Youth Detention Accommodation Scrutiny panel, I was just wondering where the voluntary sector representation was here, because all I could see was sort of professionals, and I think it'd be really useful to have some sort of community voices involved.
Yeah, sure. So we've got a couple of mentoring organisations that we work with that are commissioned to deliver direct one-to-one mentoring specifically for young Black and Asian children who are overrepresented, and those mentoring organisations feature as part of our Youth Detention Accommodation Scrutiny panel.
And are they of our community, or are they professionals who've been brought in from outside of us?
No, they are grassroots community organisations.
Brilliant, fantastic.
Okay. Okay. One thing I would ask though, I know that you've given us your assurance that obviously you do have a full staff complement, but I do have to kind of go back to the specific recommendation. It is in two parts. So staffing levels to ensure that there are sufficient practitioners to deliver a high quality service to children and young people, and appoint. So you spoke about the appointment, that's fine, I take it that box is ticked. But my question has to be to you, so in June 2019, when this inspection happened, what were your staffing levels?
Yeah, sure. So since then, since then, Chair, we've had an uplift. So we've had an additional victim support practitioner. We've had an additional youth offending, youth justice service practitioner, and an additional team manager. So we've had an uplift of additional staff. Okay,
so the one specialist victim worker, that's taken care of, and two additional, yeah?
Yeah.
Correct. Okay, two additional. And is it that additional two that has allowed you to lower the overall average number of cases that each worker has?
Yes.
Yeah?
Yeah.
All right, that's what I wanted to make sure, because there had to have been some sort of uplift, because otherwise why make the recommendation? So just wanted to get that out of the way. Okay, Councillor Salim Patel.
Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Ruiz wants to come in, I think.
What's wrong? Oh, sorry, Councillor Ruiz, did you want to say something?
Huh? No, I was just on that same point about additional resources. I think we also need to recognise that in 2019, when the inspection took place, the service was based in, I think it was called community safety, but not as community safety as we know it today. And certainly what changed in this period of time between 19 and 22 is that actually the service was shifted into children and young people services. And so therefore Michelle and her team actually benefit from having the support from practitioners in children's services and Brighter Futures. So it's not only because it was really a bit of a lone service in the sense that actually, I don't think Michelle will mind me saying this, but I'm not sure that she ever really was managed or there was any supervision. So I think that also has provided her and the team with the level of support and supervision that they probably didn't have before.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Ruiz. Councillor Patel?
Thank you, Chair. Chair, just not a question, but just a suggestion, you know, excellent report, and we have seen quite good work has been done. But what I suggest, still we have seen out and about on the streets and housing estates, there's a large number of youths still there, right? Is there any plan or are we working in partnership with any organisation to approach those youths? Because it seems that they're neglected or ignored.
What I would do with your question, if you don't mind, I'm going to park it for the Community Safety Partnership and give that to them. The only reason why I say that is Michelle is only really responsible for those young people that enter the system that have to come to her, and that's what we're kind of on. But we will come to your point, but I think it would be more suitable if we look at it when we get to Councillor Beckles. And for that, Geeta, you might have to stick around just to give some support on that. Councillor Joy Laguda?
My question is on the, oh, sorry, I've got my glasses on. My question is on the Newham Youth Justice data. You've got the reoffending. We are the last performing borough, both in England and in London. I mean, we've got, we are the 8th in the neighboring boroughs, and we are also higher than England and London. Can you explain what, you know, how we are going to get these statistics down at all?
I can,
because it seems a lot of, you know, 8 out of 8 sounds very disappointing on the reoffending.
Yeah. So we're working, so in terms of the context, we're working with 30 children who we know have reoffended. And out of those 30 children, 4 of those have reoffended more than once. So we have pulled together a plan with the partnership, and it's in your pack, but I can quickly just go through. But essentially that plan is specific to the components that we have identified that are contributing to why children are reoffending. So the first thing was for us to understand the profile of those children. Who are they? They are all males. They are all either from a Black or Asian heritage. And we recognise some of the challenges that some of those children have gone through in terms of their lived experiences. So the reoffending plan addresses providing motivation and aspiration to those children on a one-to-one and a group work setting, involves and includes mentoring with our voluntary community grassroots organisations. Family works, a partnership with our children's social care and early help colleagues. So intensive and robust family work with our parents, so with mothers and fathers, and noting that we have a number of fathers who are absent from the family home, and the importance of us ensuring that they're included in our response and intervention. And then using some of the work and outcome from our CAMS practitioners. So working with our CAMS around identifying emotional wellbeing concerns through a screening process, and delivering that bespoke tailored intervention to those children, or providing consultation to the frontline staff so that they can deliver that piece of work. Clinical supervision happens on a weekly basis. So essentially a space where children, their families, and a trusted adult within their network that they have identified with their youth offending, with their youth justice practitioner, they would come together in a room, a virtual room or face-to-face, and have a discussion with a clinical lead around unpicking and exploring what are some of the obstacles. And then finally, that restorative approach. So the role of the restorative approaches practitioner has been to interject restorative and inquiry approach. So really getting to think about and recognising that most of our children have been victims, they have been harmed, and then as a consequence, they have gone on to harm others. So it's taking it back to basics. So that's our response in relation to the reoffending data that you have. I know, and we track that on I track it on a weekly basis. So I have something that's called a reoffending live tracking tool. So the data that I'm providing you is live. This is current. I do know that it's reducing. So it was 32 and it's gone down to 30. But there is something about us as a partnership administering an element of patience, and also recognising those children that have reoffended. Whilst it is our business to address and diminish children to reduce reoffending behaviour, the children that have reoffended, the majority of those have not gone on to reoffend to something more serious.
Thank you very much. Can I just, have you got a supplement?
Yeah, just a supplement.
Can I just come in very
quickly? Yes.
Can I just come very quickly? Can I just come in very quickly?
Oh, you can come in.
Very quickly. The only thing I wanted to say to you, Michelle, is everything that you've said, I appreciate it. The only problem for me is that I can see the same sort of scenario in Hackney, Tower Hamlets, Waltham Forest, with absent fathers, with lived experiences, with adverse childhood experiences. Every single thing you've said, I'm pretty confident we could go to those boroughs and find places where that is the lived reality of their young people. But clearly something is happening different in those boroughs that means that they are not bottom of the league table. So I think the question for me is what is the difference between them and us? And if you know what the difference is, how long is it going to take us to reach where they are?
We're working with, so our neighbours are Waltham Forest, for examples, and that's our, we've got a shared borough command unit. I think you've got police in the room, so we work closely with them. The volume of work is different in terms of that comparison, and the profile in terms of the demographics is different. So, Chair, totally agree that across London, there are children with complex needs and with the same lived experiences, but the demographics are different. And certainly in Newham, across London, we are seeing a representation of Black and Asian children across London. So most local authorities are seeing that within the Youth Justice Service in terms of the recent data that's been published. And in Newham, we are seeing that significantly.
I understand that. So are you saying that, in terms of the overrepresentation, because that's not what this reoffending necessarily was about, it was about the overall cohort, but essentially I gather from that, are you saying that because of our demographics, because we have more Black and Asian boys and, young people, essentially, that's why maybe our reoffending rate is different to some other boroughs that have less of that cohort?
I think their experiences, the experiences that our Black and Asian families are enduring is contributing. This is a systemic issue and concern.
Okay, all right. I have got a lot more questions, but I'm going to let Councillor Aguda come in.
Okay, I just wanted to find out, with all the strategies we are putting in place, when do you think we'll get this statistic from 8 to maybe 4 or 3? Do you think we have a plan to reduce this reoffending?
On a timeline?
Yes, the timing, sorry, yeah.
Yeah, sure. So in terms of the data is published on an annual basis. So there's an annual target for across London. So we will find out this data is in arrears, so it's 2 years old. So when the new data is published this year, we will find out our position against the other local authorities, imminently.
Wow, that'd be lovely.
I'm hoping that, yeah, we may see some changes. But in terms of improvement, and as I said, we are seeing a reduction in that group of children who we know are reoffending. And I think the important thing for us across the partnership is for us to comprehend who they are, and then to ensure that we've got the right response to those children. So I think that we're now in that position.
Okay, Geeta.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to add, I think that the knowing the young people is a really important point, because when young people leave the Youth Justice Service and transfer into the adult probation services, they are still monitored and measured as part of our data for 12 months. And so you may be aware, of course, that we have the transition hub in the borough, which is a great resource that will help with that transition for the young people from the Youth Justice Service to probation services, and really trying to make sure that they don't drop off the cliff. And that will make a significant difference in terms of the reoffending for that young adult cohort as well. And that's very new in starting up. And of course, that will help in terms of the timeline for improving this area of reoffending data as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Gray.
Yeah, just a quick point, and apologies, I'm fairly new to this commission, but I'm just interested in the concept of restorative approaches of sort of justice, and if you had past commissions, and I'm sort of vaguely aware of it, and I'm seeing the two examples of positive feedback, but is it possible just to give a very, very brief outline of what this approach is in practical things? So
Yes.
what do they do with young people under this process?
Sure. So the first thing that they do is they do a restorative approach screening, and the purpose of that screening or assessment is to understand the child that you're working with and their experience and understanding of being harmed. Because everyone that we're working with in terms of offending, they would have been harmed or they've harmed somebody. So there is a specific screening to understand that. And then we take that child through a series of, we call it restorative inquiries. So a different set of questions. So how do you feel? How did you feel at the time when this offence was committed? How did you feel when you were arrested? How do you feel? How did you feel when you went to court? How do you feel now? How do you think the people who were harmed within your offence, and how do you think the wider system around you feels? So, for example, your family, your friends, your extended network. Who do you think? Who else has been impacted? So it could be your education placement. So a number of restorative inquiries, questions, and it's a space and place for that child to reflect on their actions. So they're reflecting on their journey. And some of the outcomes when you do a restorative inquiry is the majority of the time a child will disclose their own experience of being a victim previously. Yeah. And then some of the outcomes and goals and aspirations, if there is somebody who's been harmed directly, so somebody perhaps where there's been a theft and they've had an item taken away from them, there's a conversation, a restorative inquiry around whether it would be safe for that child to meet with that victim, and if not, would they be prepared to write a letter of apology? And would they also be prepared to do some type of reparation, so giving back to the community in some way, shape or form?
Okay. Do you have a supplementary on that? Or?
I mean, have there been successful examples of actually doing that?
Yeah.
Apologising, meeting them, doing some community work?
Yeah, yes, there are. Yeah, so we've got examples of letters of apology that have been sent, and examples of community reparation.
Okay, thank you. Recommendation number 5, capacity to deliver out of court disposals.
Yeah.
That one was quite interesting to me. It kind of insinuates that prior to this inspection, we have the capacity, and that means that young people were ending up in court when they really didn't, because because there were other avenues that they could have gone down had we had the capacity to deal with it. Do you have any idea as to what that number kind of looks like? What's the uplift in the out-of-court disposals that you've had since this report and on your improvement journey?
So just to clarify, so that action is group of staff who are responsible for children at risk of coming into the criminal justice system, and also working with children on a voluntary basis. So, for example, a school may make a referral about a child that they are concerned about due to their behaviour or association with a negative peer group. So there was a lot of focus on that group of children on a voluntary basis. And this specific action, the inspectorates felt that we didn't have the capacity to do that. And we needed to focus on the out-of-court disposals. So that's what we've been doing. So we still do deliver work and support to children on a voluntary basis, but there is more of a partnership response that includes our youth empowerment service and wider colleagues.
Thank you for that. That's kind of my point what I was making. Have you seen a decrease in the number of young people going to court and having to go through that, and an uplift in the number of young people that are having these out-of-court disposals? That's my point.
So we've seen a decrease in the volume of children going to court who've been convicted, and there has been a decrease of out-of-court disposals of children.
Thank you. Clark, can I ask that we ask for the figures? We write to them and ask for the figures from 19, 20, 21, yeah? For both of those metrics, yeah? Thank you very much. Does any member have any question that they want to ask at this time? No? Okay. 1 second. The only question I have for you, Michelle, is in terms of your budget, how much additional funding have you been given to make the changes that are necessary?
Additional funds. So after the inspection, I had a one-off uplift, and that was to recruit those three additional practitioners. Yeah.
Figure?
Oh gosh.
Rough, I mean, if you don't have it to hand.
Yeah, I haven't got it to my, I can get it to you.
You're saying it's not a recurring thing. It's like it's a one-off. You said it's a one-off, which denotes to me just for 1 year.
No, it wasn't just for 1 year. So
it's a permanent uplift in your budget then, as opposed to just a one-off grant.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
That's correct.
That's what I'm saying. Because when you said one-off, I was a bit confused. I was like, what are we going to do? 6 months and then we say goodbye? Or... Okay, fine. And so it's to recruit 3 staff. So I'm going to say, I assume about £100,000 or so. Maybe 120, 130. Yeah, in that ballpark, I would be. Sorry, Emma, do you want to come in on this? Do you have any idea, Emma, as to...
It'll be for 3 members of staff, because we have to also calculate for on costs. It's about approximately 150.
Okay, thank you very much. And do you think, Michelle, knowing what you know, that will be enough for you to get us to where we need to be? Because the challenges before you in your service, on paper, they look quite large, I'll be honest. And I just wondered from your perspective, and this is your time to speak your truth, be free, say it as you see it. Do you have the resources you need to get us to where we need to get? Like what Councillor Laguda said, at the moment we're 8th, we want to get to 4th and 3rd and 2nd and 1st. Do you have the resources to do that?
Emma, did you want to come in first before I answered?
Very wise, very wise.
Before you get your people to hire, is that what you're thinking?
I just wanted to add, Chair, that we've recently, and I think this is probably kind of an example of what Councillor Ruiz was talking about in terms of being able to make best use of our resources by collaborating across the piece. So we have freed up some additional resource for a service manager post to support Michelle to really drive forward the improvements and to kind of support her in undertaking that that kind of strategic oversight that she needs to have, particularly, you know, when we're talking about kind of children and young people's access to justice, but also to safeguarding, and the importance of those being seen together. And so that is something that is going to be progressed inside of the next couple of months.
Okay, thank you very much. That kind of brings us to the end of this section. I just want to say a massive thank you to all of our witnesses who attended for this. Michelle, we wish you well. This will be the last time you come before this committee this year with me as the chair. So just want to say wish you well, and whoever picks this up next year, hopefully you'll have made some progress so that you can come back and report some very positive outcomes for the young people of our borough. And I also just personally want to commend you for the hard work that you do on behalf of, you know, this committee. I've been firsthand to see it along with the vice chair of this committee, and we were blown away by not only the enthusiasm of your staff and team, but as I said before, but actually what you try to achieve with the budget that you've got. So thank you very much for all that you do. We really do appreciate it. As I said before, Geeta, you may want to just stay on just to give a bit of support to Councillor Beckles in case we do stray into that area, okay? And of course, any other witness who wants to stay, you're more than welcome, but please don't feel compelled to, okay?
It's quite all right, Chair. Wolves and Arsenal are still drawing, so...
Thank you very much, Councillor Ruiz. Thank you for the update. Okay, we'll be moving on to agenda item number 6, which is our Community Safety Board. Councillor Beckles and Gary, you're here for that. I can't read your name, but so can you just speak up, just give us your name and title, please?
Donahue, Chief Inspector.
Thank you very much. Sorry, my glasses are left them at home. All right, Councillor Beckles, are you going to kick us off on this one?
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. The paper that sets out what the Community Safety Partnership Board is and its current remit within the council. As lead member, the Partnership Board offers me the opportunity to see the array of work that happens across the partnership, challenge it and look at where we are as a council in terms of tackling crime in ASB, putting the residents' voice in there among the various practitioners who sit around the table. The work is listed in the paper, and I'm sure you've all read it. And irrespective of some of the challenges that we face in this borough, I'm not complacent about where we are, what we have to do, and the work that's needed to get us down some of the tables. That includes, from an enforcement perspective, support, and also being intelligence-led and using that data. And a lot of what we do is data-driven. It's about intelligence. It's about understanding where we are, our landscape, our people, and what we can do, and what interventions we can make in people's lives to reduce crime in ASB. As you can see from the information before you, some of those have made successes and other areas admittedly are high, but there are plans in place to drive those down. The partnership sets out the strategic focus, which again links in with operational, and there are a number of subcommittees which take away parts of the work that is reviewed within the partnership board so that we can assess it, we can understand it, but also ultimately we can tackle it. So I'll allow Gary and others to interject and welcome your questions. Committee.
Chair. Thank you, Councillor Beckles. I guess Commission, going through as that you've had the report, welcome questions on that. I guess just some of the points I'd probably point out, particularly in the performance areas. As Councillor Beckles said, we've seen decreases in some significant areas, but obviously increases or we remain static. Particularly notable are of total offences in Newham have gone up 2% in the past year. We're already a high borough in numbers of offences, gone up again 2%. Which is difficult again coming out of COVID, but again everyone's coming out of COVID. Violence against the person offences have increased and theft offences have increased, and overall theft and violence against the person essentially are our main volume crime areas, accounting for 55% of all crime in Newham. The domestic abuse, one of our other key concerning priority areas around the harm high offence, has increased by 2% in the past year, where we remain high in London on this again. So again, at 2% is different. Again, most boroughs in London, we remain high in a London table, to be fair and to be honest, but I think a lot of our London boroughs are seeing increases in domestic abuse. Knife offences have reduced, although knife offences, a specific knife offence with injury offence disregarded by police, that has increased in some way. But knife offences, the whole range of offences, including knives, that has reduced by 22%, and gun crime has reduced by 5% in 2020. Hate crime, and again, just to clarify a comment I've put in this, and apologies to the Commission, I think the way I've written this is confusing. Whilst hate crime, I've said in the report in 5.5, I said whilst the incidents of hate crime remain relatively small in numbers, I actually meant to clarify that and say in some of the specific respective areas and some of the areas of hate crime in their, when you break it down, overall hate crime has gone up 90%. Actually, the number of hate crime offences has gone up concerningly as well. And I suppose lastly, I'd just say robbery and burglary offences down, which is encouraging. The two general high volume offences in most boroughs. And one point I would say on one of our ASB offences, I think I've mentioned earlier in the paper, reported behaviour to the police, or police report such behaviour has decreased by 21.7%, and I'm sure Mick will attest to as well. That is, whilst that's a significant reduction in ASB, it's on the back of a huge increase the year before, which is a lot related to COVID. So there's a lot of the COVID-related infractions were recorded as ASB over quite a time as well. So again, I think next year, once we're outside of COVID, hopefully, we'll start to see a clearer figure on that. Outside of that, Chair, I'll just say that, as echo what Councillor Beckles has said, we have I've outlined a number of areas that we're doing on the focus areas. Back in 2019, we chose some specific priority areas on the back of our strategic assessment and community safety plan. We further honed in on those, or focused and reprioritised on those, to focus on violence against women and girls, women's safety, and overall violence, specifically our work around youth violence in the last year, since last April. And going forward, we are currently undertaking our strategic assessment at the moment, looking to put out a wider borough crime survey quite shortly as well to support the data viewing on that, to create a new 3-year community safety plan strategy for April going forward to 25. And I would not be surprised, as I've said later on in the report, that the high harm offences of violence against women and girls, violent crime overall, hate crime would most likely, I would be very surprised if they're not some of our main priority areas, but also, and I suppose in admittance as well, that whilst we focused on the high crime areas, I think theft is a huge volume crime area, and I think as a partnership we need to do a lot more on that. I think we focus really good partnership work around some of the violence offences, but we need to focus more on supporting police around those theft areas.
Okay, thank you very much, Gary. Chief Inspector Michael O'Donoghue, do you have any opening remarks?
Just I was echo what Gary and Councillor Beckles had to say. So I mean, Newham is a challenging borough. I think we all accept that, and there are some very good figures there. Robbery is also an issue on the borough. In terms of work to be done, absolutely, around violence and injury, there have been increases, but the increases are relatively small. We're talking 2%, 4%. But so that's admittedly there is a lot of work to be done. We have focused specifically on areas such as violence against women and girls. And interestingly, I just want to comment on the hate crime issue. And whilst it's shown as an increase, we have actively done lots of work to encourage people to come forward to report hate crime where that hasn't necessarily been the case before. So yes, that gives us an indication of where the problems are and how significant they are. Whereas before, a lot of that hate crime, particularly amongst the LGBTQ plus community, wasn't being reported. It now enables us to focus on those areas where that is. So that gives us an area to work on and focus on.
Thank you. I'll kick off the questioning, if I may. Looking at our crime stats, second in London, I mean, as a Newham resident, it's horrifying to look at. And the same question that we gave to Michelle earlier on in terms of the league table, it just seems like sitting in this chair, in this committee, I'm not going to speak for too long, but oftentimes I do see we're at the wrong end of all the league tables, and sometimes it really does kind of get to me as chair, you know, because the borough you live in, the borough you raise your children in, you work in, you know, you want to see it doing well. And all too often we are at the wrong end of the table. And I think essentially what you said there was quite interesting when you spoke about an uptick. It's a small uptick, 2%. But the problem is we start from a very high base. I think that's constantly the issue. So even a 2% increase on a very large number, it's too much. And I think that's kind of our problem. question I want to ask you, and I'm getting there, is essentially Metropolitan Police is at the back of the high crime levels in Newham. What is it that you're going to do differently this year that you haven't done in years previous to try and shift us down that table? Because that's not where we want to be second. We want to be, what's your plan?
My particular plan, well, I mean, the Met's plan is there was going to be an increase in officers coming into Newham. So that in a very simple terms, there's 180 officers into the borough over the next few months. So that will give us the ability to be in those areas, high crime areas, where we will focus on those topics that I mentioned, our specific crime challenges, which are around specific areas within the borough as well. So our town centres, we've had an increase in town centre teams, not least Stratford, which is the most challenging area within the borough. Again, we will also be looking to flex our resources into other town centres such as East Ham, High Street North, which is another area which has traditionally been the most challenging. So that will enable us to do that. So I think in short terms we'll be doing that. Intelligence again is something that we need to use more. So we will encourage people to come forward as much as we can. It's a big issue with us, not least when the news is coming, and confidence and trust. There's a lot of work that needs to be done to encourage people to come forward to tell us what their issues are. So there's going to be a lot of focus on that, around ward panels, around representation, local neighbours to come and work with us. And there's also a lot of work being done in and around our schools partnerships as well. We recognise that our victims of violent crime and say homicides, we had one for 6 months, which is some small credit to ourselves with what we're doing. But it's around working with our young people, because we recognise also that is an area that we need to do.
Okay. Councillors, does anyone have any questions? Councillor Laguda? Okay, all of you, I get it. Okay, Councillor Laguda?
I just wondered, since you said during the pandemic, the domestic abuse was very high, was it easier then to prosecute people who were doing the domestic violence because it would have been easy to get them? I'm just wondering whether it was actually because everybody was locked down. So if there's domestic violence and somebody reports, before the person runs away, you can easily get them. Is that what happened? I just want to find out
I'll come to
if that's what was going on.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll come to my police colleague in a minute, and Councillor Beckles may have a view as well. I mean, I think interestingly, I've been here just over a year now, and I spent a lot of the main part of lockdown working in another area, and again, on domestic abuse. I think the difficulty with lockdown was we were seeing, certainly across London, we were seeing often less numbers being reported because people couldn't get out to report, and essentially people were locked down with their abuser. And so essentially we weren't able to tackle that in a way. What was interesting, what was happening, and probably not overly surprising, that the National Domestic Abuse Hotlines were lighting up and the numbers were really increasing, sort of out of hours, later hours at night. And so the online ways of reporting or telephone calling, when you could be away from your abuser, were actually quite rising. But the other point I would say, in terms of the prosecution side of it, and was right across any kind of enforcement we did, and police colleagues were affected in the same way, and certainly I know from issues around evictions were the same way. A lot of the courts were either backed up or shut down as well, so we weren't getting the cases through our judicial system as much. But I don't know if you've got a view from police perspective.
I would say around domestic violence policy, we have a positive arrest policy, so we would always look to the earliest opportunity. I don't know whether it was any easier to find the perpetrators, or I would say we always try to arrest and bring to justice perpetrators of domestic violence as quickly as possible. That remains the case.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Satisfied?
It's okay.
Yep, okay, great. Councillor Masters?
Thank you. I just wanted to pick up on the ASB numbers, because it sounds like when you're talking about a 21.7% decrease, you're comparing to the pandemic. I'm wondering how we fare if you're actually comparing like with like, and looking at our levels of ASB pre the pandemic, and whether there's been any change, and whether this is about a lack of police capacity to address. because when I'm at my police panels, when I'm talking to my residents, the issue they have is that they report and people either don't come out or they don't know when they're going to sort of come out. So, and they can't get through on the non-emergency numbers. So a lot of them are kind of the opinion, you know, what is the point in me sort of actually reporting? And then you've got the backlog of the courts as well, adding to that, which is not helping.
So I don't have unless Gary's got them, I don't have we're going back to 2019 now, so I don't, in terms of comparison, I don't have those figures. I must suspect them. But it's a difficult one. ASB, lots of the enforcement around COVID was classed as ASB as well. So it's a difficult one to compare. So if I don't have the figures, I don't know. But an ASB encompasses an awful lot of various issues. So sometimes it's a police matter, sometimes it's not. In relation to, you know, reporting, the point around that people don't feel confident enough that because the police won't come out and deal with it. But I would always encourage them to come out. It's something that we record. We have in our systems to do that, and it's absolutely something that we would always look to work with the communities to have successful resolution, because we recognise that from past experience, not least in this borough, that ASB, although sometimes it may be seen as a lower or a lesser serious crime, it leads to other things. It leads to, you know, a lot of misery, and it can also lead to more serious crimes in the future. So I would take that absolutely seriously. And if they feel that police are not coming to their calls, I would encourage them to raise that with their local ward team.
Well, they would like to, but our local ward team didn't even have a police panel last month. And when we reached out, we didn't even get a response. So I don't even know whether we still have a safer neighbourhood team or a lead officer for East Ham.
Well, if that is the case, then which ward are you in?
East Ham. So it used to be Dara leading on that.
That's right. Yeah, there is a local ward panel there. There's just had a change of sergeant, so I don't know whether there was one last month. But if you feel that, you know,
Can I just interject?
Sorry, we are wondering.
Yeah, can I just interject?
Yeah.
Sorry, just to keep us on track. Obviously, hyper-local issues. If we
No, I get that.
outside the meeting,
Yeah.
specific wards and specific issues, which I will do as a council for Glasgow, because I've got my own things I'd love to talk to you about. So I will join you in that. But for this purpose of this meeting, if we just stick to the broad issues, if that's okay.
Can I ask one quick further?
And as long as it's not too hyper-local.
No, it's absolutely not. When you were talking about hate crime, you were referencing the LGBTQI community. Is that where the increase in hate crimes is lying, or are there different communities who are being targeted?
It's one area within hate crime. We have encouraged all across the whole sphere around hate crime to come forward as much as possible. There's a lot of work going on, but that is one area that we are particularly, almost something that's dear to myself. I recognise that there's an area we need to do work.
But in terms of trends, is there any particular group that is being targeted or representing these increased statistics?
We target, or we work with all the groups that come under hate crime. So there's not a particular area that I'm particularly concerned with. There has been, in light of some of the issues pan London around, not least the neighbouring borough, there is a lot of criticism that the MPS has not worked particularly well with the LGBTQ plus community. So that's well, I mentioned that because a lot of work's done to kind of win the trust and confidence.
Okay, thank you very much for that. That was really informative. Councillor Patel, I'm going to come to you. I'll come to you in a minute, Councillor Gray, only because I know Geeta's hung on pretty much to answer your question, to be honest. So do you want to ask your question again about the young people hanging around?
Well, do you want me to? Because I was just adding up what Councillor Masters asked about the hate crime.
Okay, I'll tell you what. Can we ask your earlier question now? Is that okay?
Yeah, that's fine.
I can summarise it. So essentially the question was, what are we doing about the groups of young people hanging around on the streets? That's correct, right? Over to everyone to answer, and Geeta, if you want to come in as well.
Shall I jump in quickly, Chair? And she's absolutely one of the right people to answer here. Obviously, Geeta, who stayed on here, obviously as our corporate director for Brighter Futures, he's also a key member of our community safety partnership. I suppose to go back to answer, and I suppose it ties in a number of ways. Obviously, we look at ASB and everything that goes with ASB, as the councillor is asking, whether it's, reports of street drinking, drug taking, people hanging around the street corners, we'll pick that up. I suppose to link it back, just before we go to Geeta, back to something that Mick said, in answer to your question, Chair, I would probably just add, a lot of the police focus now on violent crime and particularly issues around young people and youth violence, where it's suggesting youth violence. The police are focusing far more now around something that I think collectively as partners we used to do in the past around problem-orientated policing and problem-orientated partnerships. So we all get together, look at particular geographic areas. Hotspot policing on top of that, looking at the main areas of violence in ASB and looking to have hotspotted teams there, but also some focused deterrence work where we're looking at the key offenders, going back to Michelle's piece, those key offenders we work with. And so just picking off those individuals, offering them all the support we can and where we can't, using that enforcement angle when it comes to the end. But I guess I would probably just say, and Keith will be the expert who'll come in on it, a lot of the work that we do drive, and Keith and I are talking about doing some estate-based ASB work with Brighter Futures and working closely with community safety. But I think if I pass to Keith, she'll talk through what they're delivering with the youth zones.
Geeta?
Thank you very much, Chair, and I'm very happy to stay till the end. So I think I'll just add a couple of things. Obviously, it's important that we don't see children in groups in areas as always negative. I think it's important that children are seen with that positive lens, and often just being young people and doing what young people should do, I guess, which is to socialise together. However, we also know that there is a real opportunity for like the Youth Empowerment Service and our detached and outreach workers to engage with those young people in their estates, in their local areas and their local communities, so that they build that relationship. So it's not always an intervention or an interaction when there's crisis or that there's challenges. It's about where we build those relationships so children trust our staff and that when they can come and talk to them well before things get difficult. It's also really important that our universal offer is about opening those doors and finding the opportunities for our children, young people to do other things that will enrich them. So, opportunities around joining clubs or activities, or even getting to apply for the Youth Empowerment Fund so that they can access some financial support to go along and do some things. The approach of the detached and the outreach is very much to make sure that where we do see some of those clusters of young people that clearly are in vulnerable situations, they may well be targeted around being groomed by individuals and organised networks who are trying to get them to deal drugs or other things that are obviously of criminal nature. We work with our police colleagues and with a voluntary community and faith sector to find the right mix of who are the right people to do that engagement, to try and work out what are some of those risks and to protect and safeguard those children. And we have an awful lot of systems, and I don't need to talk about all of the ways in which we can engage those children. They go into multi-agency places, we identify where we need to work with them, and then those are the sorts of supports and interventions that go into place. And I think it's important to say that young people and antisocial behaviour is often seen as a kind of prerequisite to perhaps escalation to other things. And if we don't get that intervention right, then we will unfortunately be probably seeing our young people being harmed and exploited and entering criminal justice system, which is obviously the previous item. So we are very much around the universal offer. We're very much about the targeted response. And as Gary was just saying there, and we're really thinking about how we can improve that resource on our estates so that we have a much earlier family support offer, because I talk a lot about the children, but the interventions and support is about the family. No child grows up on their own. They're in families, they're with their peers, they're in schools and on our estates and in our communities. So it's about what else can we do together. And the final thing I'll just say, of course, all of these things happen with a voluntary sector who are doing things like the sports, the arts, talked about cadets. Many councillors on the committee there have talked to me separately about how young people can engage in all of these other activities. And it's about bringing those things and services to the areas where children are so they can see what's possible and what can really help them to steer away from any of those negative influences on their lives. Thank you very much, Chair.
Very comprehensive. Councillor Patel, are you happy with the answer?
Happy with the answer. There's a lot more to do, but I'm happy.
There's a lot more to do. But I think one of the things I think we could be encouraged by from what Geeta said and from what Gary was saying is essentially they're looking to do some work on some mistakes. And I think that is almost the part of the jigsaw that we haven't really had up until now. So we're doing the expansion of the youth zones for activities for young people, get that. We've got a detached team, but actually we need to go to where these young people are, because some of them will not go to our services, you know, that we set up. We need the people to go to them. So I'm encouraged to hear the fact that you're actually looking at that. My big worry, as always, is that the additional funding that is probably needed for that will actually materialise, but it makes logical sense as to, you know, you're moving in the right direction. It's essentially what I want to say. Councillor Gray.
Yeah, no, I mean, just reading through the report, obviously partnership is really, really important. It's key to dealing with this. And I'm just wondering, I know in the borough, the second biggest landlord or property owner are the housing associations. And yeah, I declared interest. I work for a housing association, but not in Newham. And I know there's been a number of the more high-profile murders and violent crimes have taken place in properties belonging to housing associations. So I'm just wondering how well the police and the council work with housing providers, because they've obviously got resources and capacity to deal with things, and they've got a huge problem themselves. I mean, how involved are they in the partnership?
Well, it's a great question. I just want to tag on to the back of that. Is there a regular meeting with all those people?
That's fantastic segue. Thank you, councillors. So I think there has been in the past, particularly on crime. So obviously our housing colleagues have obviously regular links with our registered providers, housing providers, on a whole range of different things. Over the last couple of months, and I had a meeting just last week, and I couldn't make today, so we've requested for 2 weeks' time. In previous boroughs, I've worked with housing associations where we've got a very specific subgroup working on crime and ASB, linking with police colleagues. We can look at everything from hate crime to making sure they've got domestic abuse in their safety plans and everything else. We haven't had one here, I think, for a number of years in Newham. We will have one by the end of this year. Working with Darren Levy and colleagues at the moment to set something up on a more regular basis. What is interesting is we do, I suppose it happens in most authorities, a lot of the bigger housing associations will have their own ASB teams, their own response to ASB. A lot of the smaller ones just don't, and so we put all that work anyway. So it's about trying to do some of that work where we have a more consistent approach to ASB, and if we can push on some of the housing associations to put some more resource into it once we give them some stark figures, and we're breaking those figures down now with our analysts to show where each of the ASB is happening per tenure and who owns that tenure essentially. But it's the other areas as well. It's about all the housing associations working with us and our LBM property, and also our licensing scheme as well, working closely with Helen Masters and that team, basically to look at the overarching things like hate crime, DA, youth violence, a whole range of stuff. So I don't think it's been as strong, particularly on the crime and ASB side, as it will be, Councillor.
Gary, would it be possible just to write in a very brief note, just saying, expectations of and timetable by which you would expect this to be in operation?
I think what
helpful
also include not just the TAs, not the tenancies, sorry, not just the housing associations, but also private rented sector and the work that Councillor Shaban Mohammed is also doing, the work that we want to support them on, and plans that we have in place to kind of expand upon this team and also look at what we can do. Because as Gary has mentioned, a lot of ASB does take place, not necessarily on council premises, but in other, whether it's private rented sector, or if it is on housing associations, and what we can do to be more proactive there by having a meeting, bringing together those partners, as has happened in the past, John, as you're well aware, does help build that intelligence and push forward. And I'm sure Gary will present those, that structure and that meeting format.
Okay, so Clark, just to make a note of that, so Councillor Gray was asking for a note as the formation of that group that Gary promised by the end of the year, and just an update as to how they're getting on. Obviously, it won't be for some time. We're not asking. Yeah, clearly you need time to set out.
And can I just ask, what's the police experience of working with social housing provided in Newham?
We work very closely. I don't work directly with myself, but if there are issues, information sharing or any particular issues that involve police response, we would obviously work in close collaboration with them.
What, local authority or the housing association?
So we work predominantly with the local authority. We don't directly work with the housing associations generally, but it's not so we wouldn't. So
We've got about 14,000 properties and then building more and more. So it's a huge chunk of our population
Okay.
living in a housing association.
Of that, about the police not working with the housing associations.
I don't
Discuss that. That's something we need to. Thank you very much, Councillor Gray. It's a very important point. Yeah, it's a very, very important point. Okay, does any other member have a question? I'm going to go to Councillor Riaz. Welcome. Yes, yeah.
Thank you. What is the situation relating to nuisance complaints?
Yeah.
With this lockdown condition, is this service managed better by the community?
Okay. Did you?
Missed that, sorry.
So you said what? The situation with the youth, right?
No, with related to nuisance complaint.
Oh, okay.
And with the lockdown condition,
yeah,
easy. Is this managed better by the community?
Oh, yeah. Did you hear that?
Yeah, yeah, you're asking about the coming out of lockdown.
Yeah, the noise nuisance. I think it's noise.
Noise nuisance.
Yeah. Noise nuisance too.
It's a bit of a strange one, Councillor. I think I talked about this in a previous scrutiny, and apologies, I probably don't have the figures in front of me now. I think right across London, right across the country, in lockdown, and again, it goes back to the police ASB figures earlier again, the noise case, things like noise, ASB just went through the roof in most places in the country because people literally were just working home. And, you know, the amount of calls we got both here and other colleagues across London for people working in their sheds and complaining about kids playing next door at 2 o'clock in the day and things like that. Sorry, Councillor, I'm not.
Sorry, what I'm getting at, because easing down on lockdown, conditions, is it going up or down?
Yeah, sorry, apologies, Councillor, I should have got to it faster. It went up quite a bit during lockdown. It started to come down. We're seeing different types of ASB going up. So issues that happen more on the street are going up. So we're getting lots of calls about estate-related ASB, things like that. When people weren't on the street, we weren't having that. We were having more calls about issues with their neighbours next door, noise issues, because people we're all cramped at top of each other essentially. So I think there's been a fluctuation. I mean, I can and happy to bring back to the group a further breakdown of ASB cases if that's helpful.
Yeah, I would say if you want to send it to Roger, we've looked at that quite extensively.
Yeah, we have, you see, and I think it's fluctuated, if I'm honest. It's a very difficult one. Sorry, Chair. It's a difficult one to answer because it really weird. It went up during the COVID period, started to come down, but different types of ASB and nuisance issues have gone up since everyone was coming back out. So it's difficult to correlate it with the lockdown measures, essentially. It's quite odd. I think we'd need to wait for another year to see what it is.
Yeah.
Thank you. Sorry, Councillor, for that.
I mean, if you want, by all means, we'll take an update, but we definitely won't be hearing any more evidence on it this municipal year because we've really looked into that. I think Councillor Beckles will agree. We did really look into that. So, yeah, I think that's enough. But if you do want to give us an update, feel free.
I think they might have been covered in a previous paper, Chair.
Yeah,
I'll check.
Absolutely fine. I don't expect you to do anything more than that. That's absolutely fine. Did you have a question? No?
I really want to sort of move on to violence against women and girls. And I've got a couple of questions I want to pick up. Firstly, in terms of the Newham Women's Safety Charter and the way we're calling upon organisations and businesses that operate at night in the borough to sign up some simple pledges. I'm just wondering what actual physical support is there for women when we're out on a night out. I mean, I saw the Ask Angela offer, but I'm just wondering to what extent we'll be sort of monitoring that to see how that's sort of actually working. And, you know, if a woman, and also you've got issues like spiking, where somebody's not in a position to ask for help. I mean, what kind of sort of safeguarding is there to ensure that if a woman who's on a night out runs into problems, it picks up and she will be looked after?
And if honest, Councillor, difficult in one way. The idea of the charter, obviously, and we're linking in with the wider London Mayor's charter on this, is initially to hopefully to encourage all of our businesses to sign up to a number of areas where they can at least guarantee that they will train their staff to look after people as they come in. Certainly women in this instance, and we're trying to do some further work around safe spaces where we look after anyone in distress. I guess in answer to your question, honestly, keeping some kind of a I suppose, a track or a measure of how well they're doing, and that's going to be difficult because we would like every business to sign up to that. So we want the capacity to go around and check all businesses. I guess what we want is everyone to at least flag that they pledged to sign up to a Women's Safety Charter, agree to what the various areas like nominated champion, that if we call on them for any kind of training, they will engage in the training. They will make sure they train their staff. You know, they will look to at least design their public spaces. How we go around and record all that work going forward is going to be a little tricky in one way. I guess the point we are asking about, particularly around spiking, the idea of both the Ask Angela training and also we do some wave training now as well. Working with the business is very similar to Ask Angela. It's about being aware around women's safety, but also the Women's Safety Charter is particularly for that issue. But that hopefully your staff would recognise spiking more, and they would notice what's going on. And particularly, you know, we've heard, you know, I've heard testimony from speaking to some women's groups about women, you know, and businesses as well. We'll say a woman might come in drunk or looking inebriated in some way, and they often in the past would have been turned away because that was the issue. We don't want that in the premises. The idea of this is to hopefully train staff to be a bit more professionally curious about what's going on and hopefully take in and support them. But if on a council, I can't guarantee that we go around and then almost go back and quality assure all those businesses for what they've done. What I hope we would see it as in from cases past the police colleagues, reports going back into ourselves, coordination of ourselves, links in mainly with a lot of it will link into our licensing and regulatory services team. You know, so Sheila and her team link in with a lot of the licensed premises. There's some response back on that array about some of the businesses who signed up. But essentially, I think it's kind of almost a mission statement for people to sign up with us to this.
Thank you, Gary. Before you come back in, Councillor Martins, I know that.
So, that's what Gary said, that's exactly what we're going to do some secret shops into those premises, which have been issues there, so we will prioritise.
And is there funding available to back any of this in terms of the training and resources as well?
Yes. From a police point of view, there's a significant amount of money being spent around violence against women and girls solely for that purpose, and there'll be more going into the next financial year.
And can I ask at this moment, obviously that's quite a bold statement you just made, and I do like to see facts generally as the chair of a committee. Can I ask that you just write to the clerk and just write to you and ask for the sort of figures that you're talking about in terms of?
I'll tell you what the budget has been in addition to our normal budgets, solely for violence against women and girls is £35,000.
35,000. Oh, okay.
Which doesn't sound like a lot in grand.
Not really, yeah.
That's solely for violence against women and girls.
That still doesn't.
That's like one police officer. You know, I mean, to be fair, the way you said it, like, you know, significant. I was thinking, you know, maybe it's just me being a bit optimistic, but maybe $1 million or $2 or something along those lines. That's what it sounded like. It was quite a grand statement, but okay, no worries. But thank you very much for that. I appreciate that. Councillor Masters.
My other related point was around safe spaces, because I was very interested to read about this because I've heard a lot about this, and I was able to use the safe space thing to advise somebody in my ward who was suffering domestic violence. But what concerned me is when I'm looking at where all these places are located, it's all over on the West Ham side. And I know you were arguing sort of before the meeting that is where a lot of the problems are located. But I know from my time in Cabinet that, you know, some of the safeguarding cases we were looking at were very East Ham focused. We know there are big problems with prostitution over on the East Ham side. So it just seems very strange that there is nothing for women in East Ham, and it'd be great to know that that's going to be changing.
Yeah, absolutely, Councillor. Apologies if I give the impression. I think maybe I was probably talking about the main volumes of crime are kind of focused in that Stratford side of the borough, being the main town centre. Absolutely, issues of women's safety, issues around attacks on sex workers, etc., happened right across the borough, anywhere in the borough, obviously. A lot of the work around these safe spaces in the pharmacies that you see in the report has been driven by our adults services colleagues, but I'll speak with them. We'll see how we will roll this out further, but certainly we would look to absolutely roll it out further than that. So we'll look right across the borough, and I'll take that away and report.
I mean, definitely a note to pick that up, I think.
Yeah.
Please.
Yeah, okay. My one is more of an observation, to be honest with you. Knife crime, 22% decrease from 2020 which I'm assuming was a bit of a low time anyway, just because of what was happening in the world. And we still ranked 6th. So nearly 25% reduction, and we're still quite high up out of all of the London boroughs. The question I would ask you is, what do you think has fueled that reduction from 2020, considering that 2020 was lockdown time, all the rest of it? I would assume that the numbers were quite low then anyway. What do you think's fueled that further reduction up till now?
Well, there's an enormous amount of variables within that, but as I said, it's picking up on what I said earlier on. There are focusing on areas where we know there are issues. So we have hotspot policing that's been in place since the beginning of last year. We've also had the Stratford Town Centre team has been here since, well, it's been enhanced since November. And again, there is some funding been given for extra patrols with our violent crime task force and our VSU into those areas. So I would say it would be that. Again, we're working with the schools as well, and developing relationships, bringing in knife archers. So just more of a focus on those areas.
Okay. So just doing some more of the good stuff you've been doing before.
Yeah, can I just add, I think from the wider partnership point of view as well, when we have had over the last couple of years, we have the Youth Safety Board on there as well, which focuses on a whole range of areas, including specifically safer place and spaces, links in with the schools place as well. I think, you know, the fact that we have, and we've been developing further our violence reduction action plan, which is a range of actions under a lot of key areas. I think there's a lot of good work going on there to support what the police are saying as well.
Thank you very much. Okay, and just one more question I have for you. With City Hall moving into our borough, does that in any way take away resources that would generally be meant for the street? Is there any sort of additional pressure on the BCU because of that? And obviously I don't want to go to operational issues or details or specific numbers, but that in no way affects our borough in terms of the resources we have? No? Fantastic. Does any other member have any question at this time?
Sorry, could I just make a quick point? Apologies. It just comes back on something you said earlier, and I probably didn't come in quick enough when Mick jumped in. I guess I think we're right that we present figures in this way, and as you've already said, we show second in London for volume, which is concerning, and, you know, and part of the reason why I wanted to come here and work, come and work to kind of hopefully help work and get to reduce those figures. And I think part of that is by targeting not only the high and harm offences, which we focused on last year, and the year before, but looking at theft as well. So we need to also bring the figures down as well as dealing with the actual high harm offences. But the point I would probably just say, and we don't talk about it a lot, I think it's right to present the figures in exactly the incident numbers as they are. What I haven't presented here, and we maybe look at a future meeting at some point, depending on the new year, is if you look at it per 1,000 population, we probably rank at 11th, I think. Sort of 10th or 11th in London when you look at the population density. But, you know, we present these as we get them on rolling year 12-month incidents. So we have the high number of incidents here, but when you look at it per population, we often fall down the table as well.
Yeah, I mean, I understand what you mean. I think, look, that's the thing with statistics and figures.
Yeah, I don't present it that way for that reason.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And I understand what you're saying. You know, essentially we've got a massive population and we're very dense. I get that. But I think ultimately it kind of is what it is.
Yeah.
And I get what you're saying. If you look at it from a different metric, it will look dramatically different. And yeah, you know, I'm glad that you resisted the urge to do that, to be honest with you, because I think it's always, and it's refreshing for me as chair to see you come before us. You know, we get the harsh reality of the figures as they are, and you haven't tried to massage them or skew them, or, you know, it is what it is. There's massive challenges. We know that, and we can see that.
That never happens in local government, Chair. Ever.
No. So as I said, look, I'm grateful you brought them the way they did, and maybe what you may want to do in future is keep them like this, but then you may want to do the comparison on the number of the people in the population per 100,000 or whatever it may be. It might be helpful for us to see it that way, but I think the way you've done it here is absolutely fine. Yeah, thank you. If no other member has any question,
Chair, if we see the overall percentage of the crime still a bit high, especially the hate crime and the violence crime, is there any plan of the local authority and the police to build the confidence of the people? Can we prepare some sort of poster we can put on the bus stops, like underground station, supermarkets and all that you report some sort of confidence in our residents that police and the local authority are seriously tackling this sort of crime.
Okay.
Hate crime and violence crime, I think it's all really, really.
Sure.
I think we can go away.
Encourage our residents.
Yeah, I think we can go away and probably look at posters, but I do think there's a lot of, there's the more substantial bit of work that will take place with our hate crime strategy, not to mention the social integration strategy, which is there. And those groups who do report to us any hate crime, then we do proactively go out there, we work with those groups. And just to talk in the past, we did have these third-party reporting centres, so that was Home Office money that we got, £63,000. We put it across libraries, we had buy-in from the police, and it was council-led, and it was well advertised. COVID unfortunately interrupted that, but there are plans once we get our hate crime strategy up and running to probably replicate those sorts of contact points. And you've given us a good idea, I guess, to put forward, advertise that better, and also communicate it with residents as well as with you as councillors.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you, Councillor Beckles.
Just really quick, tiny quickly. Yeah, just like Councillor, absolutely, thank you. And I'm really glad you asked. I mean, one of the main things we want to be doing going forward in the new year and threaded through our 3-year plan is absolutely being visible about what we do. And I know police colleagues struggle, because good news never sells in that way. But there's a whole lot of work we're doing at the moment. The police are driving around Community Matters. You asked, we did. We tell you we go back. I'm trying to produce more and more newsletters that we get through our community assemblies. Absolutely, we need to be more visible in telling people what we do. There's a fine line between scaring people by talking about crime and figures, but telling people what we're doing. I think we need to go on the side of telling people what we're doing and reassure them that they're out there. But I completely appreciate it.
Thank you. And I just want to make a note before I forget, in terms of the work that you're doing on the estate with the young people, which ties into what Councillor Patel was saying, can I just ask that we get an update on that, maybe around about May or June, to the next municipal year, but you put it in the diary for whatever happens on this committee, that you get an update as to what is going on with that. So I think that's a really important piece of work. And I think, from time to time, being the chair of this committee, you see parts that you think, yeah, actually, that'll make a big difference. But I think that sort of work, going to the source, reaching people where they're at, is the sort of thing that we need. And if that's okay with you, Geeta, just to get us some sort of joint report from Gary and from Geeta back to the committee as to the progress of that work. And I assume you may not have any sort of outcomes by then, but I suppose at least you may be able just to report back that it's up and running and how good it's going, etc., etc. Yeah, have you got that? Yeah. All right, fantastic. Thank you very much. I'm going to leave the questioning there, if that's okay with members, because nobody else has any other questions. Thank you, Geeta, for joining us. We really do appreciate it. I'm going to be moving on now to agenda item number 7, which is our work programme. And has alluded to it about how we report crime and ASB to our March meeting. That's actually what we're going to be talking about. That's okay. So we're going to actually be looking at that, and Councillor Beckles and Gary will be here along with the police as well, about how what we could do better. Those ideas that you had tonight, come back in March and give it to them. So the date of our next meeting is going to be the 15th of March. Is that correct? Yeah. And that will be on reporting crime and antisocial behaviour, and we'll receive an update and also a review from them. There will also be the signing off of our in-depth review, which is the state of the borough, and that's our report that we will be giving to Overview and Scrutiny Committee, which will then get sent to the Cabinet for them to look at and respond to our recommendations. So in the intervening time, if you could all be thinking about certain recommendations for all the sessions we've had for year, anything that you think really stood out to you, anything that you think actually that will make a massive difference to the people of this borough, if you could just note that down. You can either send it to Roger, myself, or you can bring it to the next meeting. But if you do think about it, before time, it would be easy if you did send it to Roger and myself ahead of time. Agenda item number 8, the date of the next meeting is the 15th of March 2022. Just want to say thank you to everyone for attending, especially Councillor Beckles and Gary. And this concludes the business of the committee, and I now declare the meeting closed at 8:40.